Hello everyone, my name is Amal and today I'll be talking about comparison trap. We're going to talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages to the comparison trap, and then we're going to bust some myth about them, and then we're going to share some of the skills that you could use to help you to get over or manage the comparison trap from time to time should you actually fall into that trap. One of the key points to note is that we are all wired to compare ourselves to our peers, to other people, and it helps us thrive. Noticing the accomplishment and the talents of our peers tend to motivate us to actually create or set new goals and aim higher. Accepting our strength, weaknesses by means of comparison, it helps us actually focus on honing on our strength. So when we are more focused, when we see other people's strength and talent and we look at ours, it helps us actually gives us an opportunity to see where are the gaps, should we have gaps, and focus on those to kind of, close the gaps or hone our more looking into our own, coming from a strength, looking into our own strength into moving forward. In a world where followers and likes and connections seem to be more of appreciated or actually a rock solid proof of the person's worth, we don't have to take the bait in that. So the recognition that our abilities are top-notch compared to others or compared to, let's say, someone else can deliver actually a boost of self-esteem. However, it becomes harmful when we are doing that and it leaving us feeling inferior or depressed. Our comparison trap, as researchers call it, refer to them, they tend to be those to most closely to people around our orbit, and personally we actually identify closely with, like family members, colleagues, neighbors, friends. Some of the comparison we feel that we most value or relate to are in domains that are professional achievement, wealth, appearance, and other specific goals. The effect of the upward and downward comparison actually depends on how we process the information. And when we get into a little bit of the comparison of the upward and downward, I look at it from this perspective. When you look at self-improvement, it occurs when you're actually doing an upward comparison. It inspires us to actually try harder because we saw something and someone else that we actually admire and we like. And so it gives us that motivation and inspiration to try harder and push our boundaries a little bit more. When we look at a self-enhancement comparison, it can take place when we note similarities with other colleagues. An example of that, it could be as simple as, me and her go to the same college. Or also if we play differences with people with someone inferior. So in that sense, someone that we could say, he's not as dedicated to work as much as I am. And what happened is the self end up eroded when we are comparing upward only, to know differences that are that feels actually huge to us. And when we do that, we are actually comparing ourselves to something that we can live up ourselves up to. So we have to be realistic when we're doing that upward comparison. Sometimes we dwell on commonalities with someone who we don't like, and let's say so-and-so is at a job just like me, an example that I'm using here. those with low self-esteem are more likely to be prone to depression, and because they have this narrative that they're never gonna measure up, they're never gonna stack up. The mental health of those who have low self-esteem, it's huge when you are doing this negative comparison, because you end up compromising yourself as a result. And then when you do this, you end up relying on the feedback of others and external resources to give you that sense of self-worth and the feeling of the good vibe feeling, because you rely heavily on someone else's feedback or marker status of we risk depression. Self-esteem is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You project that lack of confidence if you always constantly criticizing and being overcritical of yourself. But here's the good news. A study showed that it's not all bad, that self-comparison, that comparison trap, tend to decline actually over the lifespan, and they believe that is due to probably insight, maturity, and wisdom with age. Also because over time we tend to compare ourselves with our own yardsticks of our past instead of the present state of someone else. The comparison trap is more actually increased and more prevalent in young adult than it is with as you older mature adult. So some of the things about comparison trap that I want to bust here a little bit is that in social comparison, part of the uniqueness and the research points out about it is that it paints a heavily skewed picture of one's social universe. So people are most likely to share peak experiences about their life and flattering news than you would see otherwise. When we look at social media platform, we look at someone posting this fun picture of a great vacation or a new car, whatever that may be. We are only seeing the good stuff, but we are not actually seeing behind all of the layers that got the person into where they are. These are actually called highlights or reels. And tech companies actually, furthermore, they use the algorithm to prioritize that information on your feed in social media. And that creates that narrow, distorted slice of reality that we see that is displayed in social media is almost that perfect constructed picture of what the viewer are seeing, which end up making us feel deficient or discouraged because we don't necessarily have that life that individual is projecting on social media. So we feel less than. Psychologists call that envy up or scrolling down to summarize the feeling provoked by when we are weighing our worth next to others. Since comparison, and let me highlight that and emphasize that statement, since comparison is a fundamental human impulse, there is really no way of avoiding it or shutting it down. But if we understand its origin, where it comes from, the root causes, and the mechanism to what to look for, we might be able to reduce the negative impact it would have on us, and also we might also amplify the good both offline and online. So with social comparison theory first came actually in 1954, that we actually compare ourselves as a way of evaluating ourselves against others. And the root and the impulse is connected to the instant judgment that we make of other people. It's a key element, actually, of the brain's social cognition network that can be traced back into the evolutionary days, where the need to protect and assess threat, that's really where it comes from, really the root of the comparison trap. It happens not only actually in a strategic manner, but it also happens spontaneously and automatically. So we don't help it. It's like a switch. It comes on immediately. And whenever, especially when we are confronted with other people that, let's say, we just met or we don't know, and we're trying to size them up and create that checklist, us versus them, and us and like me and not like me, and all that comparison things that we do behind all of the narrative. Even when we are faced with a standard that is actually extreme, what we end up doing is we first compare, and then we try to correct for a better outcome of that. The number of Twitter likes and hearts on Instagram, likes on Facebook, the connection in LinkedIn, of that the other person garners or have compared to what we have, it makes it feel like a rock solid proof of the person's position in terms on some imagined ladder that we have. Like that person is a subject matter expert, has the credibility because they have X amount of people that are following them and the likes and the comments and so forth. That's not necessarily the case, actually, and most cases is not necessarily the case. Social media can actually skew our preferred comparison domain. What do I mean by that? Making us actually think that we care about something that we really truly never really cared about from the past. So when we are comparing ourselves, especially in a case where with someone of a higher value, we're agreeing with them, they're agreeing with us, we relate to them, they relate to us, there is so much similarity, it activates that part of the brain unlike no other drug can, because it activates that dopamine, that sense of connection and validation, and the feeling of good. So that explains why adolescents actually become addicted to social media. They go into social media to seek out the attention and the feedback and the validation, and it becomes their life, and they get so consumed. And the things that we not necessarily used to care about, maybe we never really cared about our acquaintances, how they decorate their kid's birthday cake or the exotic location they went to. But when these are in social media, they show up in social media, it might sound cliche, but we meet ourselves with the reflective moment, and we say to ourselves repeatedly, okay, we suddenly now, we consider our own inability of not being able to create this life, that perfect rose color, life, and wonder why we are not at that exotic destination like that, like so and so. So those are become the social comparison and the traps that we tend to fall into. So what do we do about the comparison trap if we find ourselves in there? Here's what I say: screw the scoreboard. When social media stirs up feeling of an inadequacy, and there are some ways that we can manage that. And some of these ways I'm gonna talk about, you probably already know them. So as an example, you can go pretend you're broke, delete all apps, whatever, even accounts, you can delete, unfollow, whatever it is that you could do to help you reduce that negative feelings that you experience. That might also be clean your list, your friends list. You can avoid seeing some of the posts and pictures that actually bring you those feelings, routinely come up and make you feel bad about yourself. Ultimately, though, the greatest protection against falling into the comparison trap and the best way to pull yourself out of it is to develop and maintain a stable sense of self. Cultivating your identity and self-esteem, nutritioning relationship with people who actually see you for who you really are, for your true self, and stay attuned to your beliefs and your truest beliefs and value system. Sometimes we find ourselves in this, there is a tug of war internally. When you are in this tug of war place, ask yourself questions about, do you seek to feel good about yourself through social media? Does it give you that reward? Or do you rely more on stable ways of recognizing who you are? A stable sense of self comes from actually thinking about who you are in the absence of other people's feedback and opinion on you. What are your values and your preferences in the absence of anybody else knowing about them? Can you actually be proud of the person you are who isn't actually publicly being posted on or seen in the social media platform? Those are questions that you can ask and do the self-inquiry about within yourself to find out and solidify some of these feelings and help you cope through it. There are other ways also to kind of help. These are mainly like this. You can use actually programs like Moments or Stay Focused that tally up how much time you spend in social media. However, though, these are more for people who have that impulse and addiction that they can't stay away from social media. They don't have that self-restraint. It encourages you to, and it forces you to log off. Ultimately, though, it's not about how much time you spend in social media that has the greatest bearing. It's actually that has the greatest bearing on how it makes you feel. It's how you spend social media when you're comparing to others does it get you lost in their own idealized life and world, and makes you forget about your own joy and enjoyment? That's where it's critical. But if you're using social media, you're spending your time by contributing and sharing and interacting with other people. It can it has the opposite effect of that negativity feeling. Sometimes when you look at Facebook, people are staying in Facebook because it has these countless opportunities where you're keeping in touch with family members and friends that live in other parts of the world. Seeing where they are, how they're doing, and keeping up with what's happening in their life. Similarly to, social media is a place where you can actually express yourself or even seek support. So it depends how you use social media. That is more important, the information you process versus how much the time you spend in social media scrolling mindlessly. What would the other part I would say is, we said screw the scoreboard. The other part is do you. How you go about doing you. So there are few aspects to go about doing you. The first one I would say seek connection, not comparison. Building connection through social media is and connecting with people to widen your view and your perspective, right? look up just a little bit. When I say look up just a little bit, we're talking about the upward comparison. The upward comparison can provoke motivation and effort, that you see something about someone that you admire and you want to try a little harder and see if you are going to do, can you do that? And it using it to better yourself versus kind of making yourself feel bad or inadequate or dealing with the deficiency. Also, remember, when you're comparing yourself, compare yourself to someone who's 1 or 2 level above you, is more realistic than comparing yourself to someone way at the top of the ladder. Count your blessing. Count your blessing, because in truth that when you count your blessing, it makes you, and you stop obsessing at what you lack. It's called conscious downward comparison. You're comparing yourself to people who are less fortunate than you, and it will remind you that life frustrations, despite the life frustrations and challenges, that you still have a fabulous life. When you think about it, when we compare ourselves to our generation of now than the ones done before us, there are things that they didn't have and they didn't experience. And so we are in a good place, despite the challenges, despite the noise, despite the overloadedness of information in social media. Compare yourself to yourself. This one is really important. Why do I say that? It's important because we have this habit of literally forgetting to look at our own accomplishment. We always comparing ourselves to the outside, to the other people, and we lose sight of the big picture, which is our own incremental growth. So when you compare yourself to yourself, you're comparing yourself to, it's about noticing your own accomplishment, but the progress you made from last year to this year. That is where you want to compare yourself. When you compare yourself from the moment you're on at this current state and looking back into last year or the year before, you will notice the incremental growth that you've been doing along the journey of life. That matters. That is growth. That is bettering yourself. That means something. That would give you it keeps you grounded and centered, and actually seeing that, that internal evaluation that you do within yourself. Pursue upward joy. And when you pursue upward joy, is actually using the social comparison impulse as a springboard to a true self-growth. Instead of generating envy and jealousy, which is a form of hostility, explore what you admire about the other person and what you appreciate about other people's success. That cultivate joy for their success, and it can actually drive your own personal growth, because there is someone out there you admire, someone out there that you appreciate the effort that they put through, and that cultivate that sense of pride in you, where you also would love to get to that point. And so it kind of pushes you towards your own journey of that self-growth. Start the day without comparison. It's as simple as that. When each day passes by, start your day without comparing it to the day before, or even compare it to the day with other people. Just focus on that new day and how that new day is gonna unravel, and let it unfold. Curb your feet. And we know this, I spoke about it earlier, is that if you are in your social media platform, that you have followers, or you follow people or accounts or companies or whatever, that over time it doesn't do you any good. All it does is make you feel bad, you feel deficiency and inadequate and all that. Then you know what? It's time for you to clear out your feed. Leave either clear out some of your feed or accounts, or follow accounts that bring you inspiration, love, and genuine interest and joy. That also helps. Focus on your own goals. So rather than you're looking at other people and how they're accomplishing and achieving, and you're just, all it does is going to make you stuck. It's going to keep you stuck, and it's going to keep you wonder about your own. So no, don't lose that big picture. The big picture is to focus on your own goal and what you would like to see happen in progress for you, and compare that to you, to what you were a year prior to that, a 2 year prior to that, whatever you want, that comes in your previous lifetime, I guess. Put life into perspective. It's amazing when we are driven into seeing things and putting life into perspective. When we do that, it actually helps us in a sense that it reminds us, it's really simple. Reminding yourself that whatever else is happening in the world and how little something will matter to you 10, 20 years from now. I would go as further as what's so important to you now, would it really matter a year or two from now? Probably not. So having that, being able to have that perspective taking and understanding that life changes and evolving all the time, and putting it into perspective, what matters to you today might not matter 5-10 years from now. Do one thing for someone else. When all else fail, do something that takes you out of your own world into the realm of others around you, because self-comparison trap is its essence actually is a self-indulgent emotion. So when you are being with others, helping them in whatever way you can, it's as simple as an effective way of stopping yourself from indulging on those pointless thoughts. Because again, it's a self-indulgent emotion. So when you step out of yourself for a change and kind of just focus on helping someone else feel good, feel better, you will in return of that, when you do that, it's actually quite effective, because it takes you away from all of these pointless emotions and thoughts that doesn't make you feel good about yourself. And in that regard, I'm gonna actually conclude with this, is that my final thoughts in the topic: social media has done so many things that is positive and good for us. It allows us to connect with people and other community from all over the world, and also build communities. Otherwise, we couldn't have done it without the social media access. But it also has given us million other moments where in our day that did not feel so good to us, that we felt we don't measure up. This surplus of information can overload our social comparison mechanism and lead us into the comparison trap, leaving us feeling depressed and thinking that we will never be enough and we won't measure up. So the good news is this: the choices we make can actually help protect us from the despair and the hopelessness and the despair and the hopelessness of perpetual comparison. And that is really what matters, is that the more we go in our life and make actually conscious decision and pay attention to what we're making and what we're taking in terms of information and what we're seeing, if it makes us feel really bad about ourselves, and end up kind of nudging us and get us into that fall into the trap of the comparison, then we have to step back and reassess, and we have to take actions to help protect our own mental state and well-being. Thank you so much for being with me today and listening to this video. I hope you actually find it useful. May you be at peace, may you be well, may you be happy. I will see you next time.